Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to this 14th video teleconference for Histology Lab. So this one is actually part one of video teleconference number 14, which is about the reproductive system. And this particular video teleconference or recording, I will be talking about the exercise on the male reproductive system. So just to look at our calendar here, we are now on the 1st of December. I've actually posted the new exercise on the endocrine system. So I hope amidst the Xavier days, you will still be able to, work on it slowly so that you'll be able to finish it by next week. And then after that, I will be sending out the last exercise, which is on sense organs. So we are actually we are 1 week late based on this calendar. Okay. Um, then for the pre-final exam, that will be on exercises 16 to 20. While for the final exam, your compilation of the photos, the labeled photos from exercises 1 and 20 will cover for your final exam. So that will be your final project slash final exam. So here is a plate 1A no, on the cross section of the male gonad, the testis. So we can see here the capsule that actually surrounds the testis. It's the tunica albuginea, as we see here. Um, Inside that will be the tunica vasculosa, called because it usually houses blood vessels, as you can see in the level here, just inside the tunica albuginea. And then these actually sort of go into the stroma of the testis, as we see here. So we have the mediastinum testis, which actually houses also structures like the reti testis, as shown here in the larger photo. Okay, so um, the mediastinum testis actually branches out still into the testis itself, forming subtula testis. And this one divides the testis into lobules, we can see here, which are composed of several seminiferous tubules. So the one highlighted here in broken lines. But the one pointed by this arrow is the one here in the mediastinum testis. As I mentioned, this one holds the reti testis, and we can see the reti testis is actually connected to the seminiferous tubules. So we know that in the seminiferous tubules, the sperm are made. They are going to be transported. They pass through um, the reti testis and then into the efferent ductules and then into the epididymis. So this one is a bigger view of the mediastinum testis here. And here we can see portions of the reti testis, the linings of which are will help us differentiate this from a seminiferous tubule, because it is like a tubule, okay, but the lining is not the stratified cuboidal epithelium. It's sort of squamous. So we can also see here that the mediastinum testis also holds blood vessels. Then here we have a portion of the testis focusing on the group of seminiferous tubules. Okay, so here's one, and we can see how thick this epithelium is compared to the one from the reti testis. This one is stratified cuboidal. Here's another seminiferous tubule, and then here's another. We can see that each of these are separated from each other with a stroma. The stroma supports blood vessels, and cells which specialize in the secretion of testosterone, known as the interstitial cells of Leydig. Okay, so there are cells here that are sort of vacuolated, and those are the interstitial cells of Leydig. So focusing on one seminiferous tubule and enlarging it, we can see that this is the basement membrane where the epithelium actually lies on. So this one is a seminiferous epithelium. This is where meiosis produces new sperm cells or spermatozoa. So there are several cells here, and the biggest among them with these nuclei that are non-dividing and with very prominent nucleoli. Here's one in the background. These are the Sertoli cells. So the Sertoli cells actually do not undergo meiosis, but they are here. They're columnar, they're tall, and their apical portions usually um, sort of hold onto immature sperm cells like these spermatids. Their main function is to produce a substance that actually helps nourish the forming sperm. So, what else aside from the Sertoli cells that we see here? We have spermatogonia. Okay, these are the cells near the basement membrane of the epithelium that we see here. Um, Speaking of the epithelium, there is a lamina propria here, and there's also a very thin layer of smooth muscles, which can actually sort of contract to have that subtle peristaltic movement in the seminiferous tubule that will also help sort of move the newly made sperm into the epididymis later on. So this spermatogonium will undergo meiosis. We cannot see here anymore um, the processes, no, but we can see that here's a primary spermatocyte. Okay, this one, the nucleus of which is sort of different from the Sertoli cell. This one is a non-dividing nucleus. This one is a dividing nucleus. So is this one. You can see the chromosomes condensing. So they are actually caught here in the middle of early prophase, so prophase 1 of meiosis. And then the secondary spermatocyte is difficult to come by. What we see here instead are spermatids. So these are the ones with a very compact nuclei. These are already haploid as opposed to the diploid primary spermatocytes. And these ones will mature. They will lose a large portion of their cytoplasm, and those will be reabsorbed back by the Sertoli cells that are holding them. And when they mature, they are released into the lumen, and with the help of the subtle peristaltic movement helped by the smooth muscles here, they are going to passively, because they cannot swim yet, move to the epididymis where they mature. So this is the passageway, because we have the seminiferous tubule, and then they're going to be brought to the retitestis. From the retitestis, they are going to passively move into the epididymis, the spermatozoa. Okay, and the passageway to the epididymis is this efferent ductule, as we see here. So we can see that the epithelium lining here is sort of lobed, okay, scalloped, okay, that's the term, because the cells here vary. There are cells that are columnar with cilia, there are cuboidal, so they're shorter, and then there are even basal cells that believed to replenish the epithelium. And then underneath that will be smooth muscles. Okay, these also, just like the one in the seminiferous tubule, these may also cause slight peristaltic movement in the efferent ductule to move the spermatozoa into the epididymis. And of course, here we have the adventitia. So from the efferent ductule, the sperm will move into the epididymis, which is a highly convoluted tube just behind the testis itself. So if we actually, these are actually all made of the same tube that are folded on top of each other or onto each other. If we unravel this one, this could be around 80 centimeters long. So can you imagine that one? So this epididymis is covered with a sort of a capsule called here as a sheath. Okay, and the sheath can actually penetrate through the stroma of the epididymis here, forming the interlobular stroma. And then the tube that is folded onto itself is evident here in cross sections with these irregular shapes. These are the ductus epididymis. So the ductus epididymis, as we can see here, is actually lined by pseudostratified epithelia that have stereocilia. And as opposed to the one from the seminiferous tubule, we now see here spermatozoa. So we usually come by spermatozoa inside these ductus epididymis because this is the storage facility for the maturing sperm cells. So the sperm cells will mature here and will gain the ability to swim. The stereocilia are very important because if the sperm here is not used for a long time, and they can be reabsorbed back into the body through the stereocilia of the lining here of the epididymis. Okay, so let's say that the sperms are called upon. So where do they go after being stored in the epididymis? They are going to be propelled into the vas deferens. Okay, the vas deferens is the long tube that connects the epididymis to the urethra, okay, of the male. So this one is a very muscular tube. The book even mentions that it's difficult to distinguish this from the ureter, but upon close inspection, we can see that the epithelium is different. Instead of a urothelium, it's actually pseudostratified with pseudocilia still. So you have a very thin lamina propria, actually not pointed here, but it's very thin. And then you have the epithelium, and then you have a very thick muscularis composed of 3 layers. You have an inner longitudinal layer, a middle circular layer, and an outer longitudinal layer, and then an adventitia. So the vas deferens that we saw a while ago is actually part of a bigger bundle. Okay, so several blood vessels, several other tissues go with the length of the vas deferens. And this whole thing is what we call as a spermatic cord. Okay, so what makes up a spermatic cord? First, it's being wrapped around here by a mesothelial layer called the tunica vaginalis. So here's a closer look at that. And then here is the vas deferens. Okay, the one from the previous slide. There's the lumen, okay, with a very thick muscular layer. And then in this portion, highlighted by the broken lines here, these are sort of mix of arteries and veins forming the pampiniform plexus. So you can also see nerves here actually. And then here in the top portion, we have voluntary muscles called the cremaster muscle. This can actually be, as I mentioned, it's voluntary. this can actually cause the movement of the testicles up and down or away or towards the body. Okay, so when the environmental temperature is cold, the testicles need to go closer to the body to be warmed, and the cremaster muscle will contract. Okay, and when it's a uh, warm day, then the cremaster muscle will relax, allowing the testicles to go farther away from the body so that they can cool cool down. So especially if someone has a fever, I'm sure you have observed that one. And here we have a closer look of the vas deferens. Here's the vas deferens. Here's the lumen here. Then here you have some blood vessels. So this one is an artery, another artery. So these are all parts of the pampiniform plexus. And here we can see connective tissue, similar to the one that surrounds muscle fibers. These are known as fascia. Here's another portion. This is on this side. So here is the vas deferens this time. And here are blood vessels again. So here's a vein. And not very distinct. There are supposed to be nerves in this area also. And here we have a portion showing the cremaster muscle. Then from the vas deferens, no, the sperm that has been propelled out of the epididymis will continue moving, no, towards the urethra. But before that, um, secretions from a gland known as the seminal vesicles will actually add to the volume, no, of the sperm. So we now have the seminal fluid. So we can see here the characteristic folding of the epithelium of the seminal vesicle. So very complex patterns. You have sort of cuboidal epithelia with there are supposed to be yellow pigments inside of these epithelial cells. You have here the lamina propria. So if you can remember the lamina propria of the inner lining, the mucosa of the small intestine, you're familiar that in between here, these are lamina propria. And you have here a layer of the muscularis. You have the internal layer, and then the outer layer, and then the adventitia. Okay, so the seminal vesicle will actually secrete its exocrine secretion into the urethra just before or just above the prostate gland. So then we have the prostate gland. So the urethra actually passes through the prostate gland, and so is the vas deferens. So the portion of the vas deferens that passes through the prostate gland is known as the ejaculatory duct. So we can see here in this portion of the cross-section of the prostate gland, the capsule, okay, and the septa that emanate from the capsule. Here's a closer view of the ends of the secreting portions of this gland. So we call these the prostatic alveoli. And then many of them have this pinkish color inside. These are actually prostatic concretions. The older a male gets, the more prostatic concretions will be observed, no, in the lumens of these prostatic alveoli. Then this is surrounded by a fibromuscular stroma. So this also has the ability to contract, but this one is smooth muscle. So it's autonomic. And then here we have a prostatic duct that will lead from the secretion here in the alveoli to the urethra. And eventually the semen from the ejaculatory duct will mix, with the secretions of the prostate gland here. And here we have larger views of the prostatic alveoli still, lined with sort of cuboidal epithelia, while the prostatic duct is lined with pseudostratified epithelia. So now that the sperm plus the secretions from the seminal vesicle, we still forgot the bulbourethral gland, and then we have the prostate gland are now mixed together. So we now have the seminal fluid. So all will now pass through the male urethra. So this is a cross section of the male urethra. It's different from the female urethra because it's longer, okay? And although the similarities include, the presence of erectile tissue surrounding the urethra, so that's also true for females actually. Um, so this is specifically in the males called the corpus spongiosum. Okay, and here you have the mucosa of the urethra. You can see here cavernous spaces that fill with blood. Okay, when the the penis will actually be erect, with this filled with blood. You also have the trabeculae that divides the cavernous spaces from each other. And here you have the adventitia of the urethra itself. Here we have a small portion, although I don't know if you were able to label this, but this one is a portion of the tunica albuginea mentioned in the manual. Here's a closer view of the epithelium. The epithelium is, it could be urothelium already, no? So similar to the one from the urinary system, in the many of the ducts there. You can see cross sections of glands of Litre. These are urethral glands that will coat the urethra with substance, a mucus-like substance that will protect it from abrasion from urine, for example. And then you can see blood vessels here. And of course, this is the lamina propria. And then lastly, the copulatory organ for the males is the penis. So this is a cross-section. We can see, of course, that this is the dorsal part, and this is the dorsal and then ventral part. Here's the urethra a while ago. It's surrounded by the corpus spongiosum. Okay. Here in the dorsal part, of course, there are blood vessels. Okay, so you can see the superficial dorsal vein here in the dorsal part. On the upper portion of the corpus spongiosum, you have this pink tissue here. This is actually the tunica albuginea that completely surrounds the corpora cavernosa. So there's a pair of them. So there are actually three tissues that are erectile here. No, we have the corpus spongiosum, the corpus cavernosa left, and then the corpus cavernosa right. So three of them. The corpus cavernosa, corpora cavernosa are divided here in the middle with this median septum. Okay. Then here we can see blood vessels. These are the deep dorsal blood vessels, while the ones here just underneath the skin, which is enclosed in the fascia, is the superficial or are the superficial blood vessels. Here we can see a dorsal nerve. Okay, so this one is actually all of the slides that you need to label in this particular exercise. Now to the questions. What is the consequence when cremaster muscle relaxes or contracts? I think we have answered that one a while ago. What are the components of the blood-testis barrier and what is its significance? We have answered this in the lecture, and that has something to do with the Sertoli cells. Okay, so the Sertoli cells have this tight junction at near the base, near the basal lamina. Its significance is that it prevents antigen, sperm antigen from entering the blood. And why is that important? Because if sperm antigen enters the blood, it might be identified as a foreign body, as an allergen by the body, and the body will be producing antibodies that will target one's own sperm, and that's bad because your sperm will be killed by your immune system. So the blood-testis barrier prevents that from happening. What do prostatic concretions represent? They represent um, the um, the reactions, no, from the prostatic secretions. They will actually sort of accumulate slowly um, in those alveoli in the prostate gland. And as one becomes older, they will become more prominent. So they are sort of sedimentation of the secretions of the prostate gland. Then describe the role of the erectile tissue in the penis. They will actually help the penis be rigid, thus facilitating copulation, no, with a female, the transfer of sperm cell from the male to the female. So that's impossible without the erectile tissue in the penis. So in the next video, I'm cutting this video into two because it will be very long if I'll also talk about the female reproductive system here. I will be posting that one soon, maybe on the next day. But I'll have the reminders here. So quiz number 9, both on the male and female reproductive system. This will be on December 7, Tuesday at 6 to 7 p.m. Again, for the next video teleconference, it might be a recorded one. No? So I don't know yet because our schedule is really tight, no, given all the more that there are holidays within this week. So for your questions, clarifications, and concerns, please just email me or message me through eLearn, and I will respond to you as soon as possible. Okay, so I hope you will have fun answering or doing the rest of the laboratory activities on the endocrine system.